All right. Good morning, or good evening, or good day, or whenever you watch this video. Um, I want to make a video on basically why I think into being independent is a better way to go. Um, Probably initially. Depends on. Um, it really depends on how being independent can elevate a person's career. Because sometimes it might be the point where you might have to be independent, and then at one point you might have to go with a label. But at least you can, if you build up enough leverage with a label, then you might have your bargaining power to keep creative control in the rights of your music will probably be a lot better than before. You have to look at it like this. This is for people that may not understand how the game was played and why artists were known to get screwed. It wasn't the old system where you got to remember when the gatekeepers, the gatekeepers were mostly the commercial recording studios, because they would only cater to record labels simply because those artists would get these big advances that could pay the studio time. Most independent people didn't have that kind of money to pay for that type of studio time, so they wouldn't be able to get the booking. The smaller recording studios, or people that would start their own small recording studios, was a little bit different. I'm talking about the majors. The other gatekeepers would be major distributors. That's how this music would get into record stores and all these places that sold music. All the record stores, Walmart, Media Play, Hastings when it was around, Media Play when it was around, Target, Best Buy, any place that sold CDs. Those were distribution outlets that these distributors, whatever. But you couldn't get it. You couldn't get major distribution, and most of the time, most artists that could fund everything but the distribution. But the distribution wouldn't deal with you unless you were with a label, a major label especially. The other gatekeepers would be the radio, because that's the only thing that was around then. And, because radio came first, then TV. Like, we're talking about music TV especially. Some people perform on, like, TV shows like The Tonight Show, but video, when that started in the 80s, like 81, with MTV and VH1 and BET and all that. So those, the exposure with radio and TV was the best way for people to get their stuff marketed, so people would know who they are and start listening to that artist. You needed to be heard on the radio, and you needed to be seen on video. And then when people see the videos and listen to the music, and they know who these artists are, they can start going into their shows. They can start going to buying their music and everything else. With the record labels and all that, and the publishing companies, basically monopolized on that, where they became the controlled gatekeepers to the gateway to all those. So with the record label, that means the record labels pretty much were the gatekeepers to get people on the radio, music video, and then that way an artist can then promote. Start doing promotion and marketing, where they can start doing radio spots, concerts. They can sell out more concert tickets, tour more. That way, so record labels, when they would start get these artists, they would get A&Rs. They would get these artists and repertoire people to become A&Rs for their label to find talent. Because the biggest mistake that a lot of people probably make is they assume that a record like them because they are great talent. They have this great talent, you know, whether they're a great singer or a great musician or whatever, a rapper, whatever. They're thinking that, oh, these record labels are willing to do all this stuff for me because they like the way I sing or whatever. You have to think, when you're around thousands of people that all can sing, or all can rap, or all can play instruments or whatever, that's not as impressive as it is. Not impressive. The best way I can describe it is, we tend to, and I don't want to make it sound like it's narcissistic, but we tend to over exaggerate our own talent, and we can become self-absorbed with our own talent, that we seem to think, because of that I'm good at, whatever this talent. I don't care if you're good at playing basketball, baseball, sports, doing hair, being a mechanic or whatever, being a singer, musician, or whatever. We tend to think that we are better than we are. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And I'm not saying people aren't good, and they should be, it's almost like being a borderline. It's almost like not necessarily being self-absorbed or being arrogant versus being confident. You should be confident at your skill and talents, but yet not being arrogant about it. In other words, the difference between confident and arrogant is, the arrogant part is just being an asshole about it. I hate to throw the, because I usually don't curse on my channel. But that's basically what it is. It's someone being an a-hole about that, over someone who just knows they're good. And then some people, it's different. Some people that know they're good and they're actually good versus people that think they're good but they're not. Some people say, I know I'm good, when really they're not. So when a person that they tell, I know I'm good, and everyone else is like, then that's not, they think they know they're good, but really they don't know they're good. They think they know that they're good, or whatever I'm trying to say. Some people think they're good when they're not. And that's the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? They're overly confident and they're not even good. And that's just the reality. And there's a lot of people that either trying to play an instrument or trying to sing or whatever, trying to rap or whatever, and they're not as good as they think they are. They're suffering from the Dunning-Kruger effect. And that's just the reality. I know I'm probably bumping that, which is the mic is probably picking me up, hitting this spring. So with that being said, so these A&R would try to find people that know they're good and confident without being arrogant or whatever, that, because some people can be, that can be a turnoff when you're arrogant, just smart out, like, condescending, always got some, man, you're good. I know. That kind of rubs people off the wrong way. They want people to be still kind of modest. You don't have to be weak about it, but just kind of modest, anyhow, moving on. So here's my deal with the record labels. This is the problem that I have with record labels. It's not so much the advance or even, recouping even tour support or anything like that. The problem that I have is how they swindle the numbers and take control, including copyright control. In other words, they take your rights. They take ownership. When really, it's almost like leveraging to make you sign something that gives up something that you own, so that way they can try to guarantee that they're going to make money. And that's the part that I don't like. I don't have a problem with an advance. In other words, an advance is just the money, a partial amount of money up front that's anticipated is going to be made, right? So in other words, if you do the math on this, let's say an artist that's really good, a musician, an artist or whatever, and they're really good, and because they're really good, when they go to the studio and they record these songs, And the songs are good. The songs are good. They're good. Let's say they're a singer, and then the music that was recorded is good. Where it's almost like everyone that listened to it, like, man, I like that. You know, Barry Gordy used to test that whenever they would record songs. He would get listen out and see if everyone would be like, oh man, we love that. You know, if he got a group of people to like it, then he would probably pretty much would say, yeah, these people like it, then I'm almost sure our audience will like it. And that process actually worked. You know, we talk about the Motown era, you know, where, you know, the Supremes and the Four Tops and Stevie Wonder and Smokey Robinson and all these artists that come out of Motown, they hit the radio. 90%, a lot of people liked it. You know, it even crossed over white audiences and started liking it. They're like, man, that's why the Motown era was such a huge thing, because it was intended for black artists that couldn't get into white venues and get with the white record labels and all this other stuff. But the music was so good, white people, you know, was like, man, it's, you know, so they couldn't dispute how good the music coming out of Motown. And this is other, you know, we still had Muscle Shoals, Alabama, Fame recording studios and then you would still have, you know, Stax out of Memphis, and there was other places that would record African American artists. But let me get back on point. So I don't have a problem with the advance portion. So the numbers is, let's say this artist, they're good, they put out music and it sells, and that's what the record label wants to see. You know, so they're like, yeah, we gave you $250,000 advance or whatever, or $500,000 advance or whatever, and the album went platinum, which means it sold a single, or an album sold, you know, single usually would be like 99 cents or whatever. So if it sells $1 million, it only made about $1 million. But if an album, which usually went about $9.99 or whatever, and it sells platinum, then it made about $10 million. So the more money that is made off of sales of a unit, the record label, that's what the record label is trying to see, because that's their bread and butter. They're in the record sales business. So if an album made $10 million, and they already advanced the artist $500,000, well, naturally, the artist, the record label are already in the hole $500,000 until that record sells. And then once their record sells, then they can take the $500,000 to get them back out of the hole that they gave the artist. So I don't have a problem with the advance. And then the artist needs to tour. The thing is, most artists that sign a contract don't have any money. You know, they just have talent and skills. A lot of them don't have the money, because if an artist was a multi-millionaire, they don't need a label. They can fund everything themselves. They can pay for the studio time. They can pay for the manufacturing time. They can, you know, then solicit a distributor. All they would just need to get a distributor. And then after that, you get the distributor in all the stores and on, you know, everything else, and then they can market themselves to talk to all the radio stations and talk to all the video places themselves. And you know, a lot of times there were some artists that had to do this a little payola to do just that. But there's so many radio stations out there. There's so many, you know, there's only a few video places, but there was, you know, other than, you know, local cable, there was mainly 3 major video places. What it was like, oh, I got some air, you know, this thing is popping up on I'm not worried about that. No, I don't, you know, on the internet anyway. So, I got something going on here. What is this? Oh, I had a song still up. Oh, okay. I forgot this was still going. Okay. So my problem is not even tour support, because they know that with the artists, once they got this music and it's selling, which means SoundScan is tracking the sales, because the music has a UPC code, an ISRC code, and all that. So it's tracking that. So it's tracking the sales on Billboard. Billboard's tracking it, which means the RIAA is tracking it. because RA is the award company for sales charts. Billboard is just a charting company to see who's selling, who's at one position based on how many sales. That puts them in a position. So this artist sold, 25,000 this week, and this artist sold 24,000 this week. Well, the person with 25,000 this week get a higher position on the sales chart than, especially in the same category of music. So it depends on how many units the artist is selling per week. And if this artist is selling the most units per week, if they're selling the most units per week, they get the number one spot on the Billboard chart because they're selling the most each week. That's why I was talking about. This spent 14 weeks at the number one spot, or whatever. That's how you chart. It's just based on how many units you're selling per week. And now it's about digital downloading, how many people are buying or even streaming per week the most, which artists streaming or digitally being sold per week. That's what they're doing now. The problem that I've had, the only problem that I have is how they would trick the numbers and take ownership. In other words, I'm only going to get, this artist is, if you know about the two most important things that you should do when it comes to making your music is filling out whenever you write your song and you record your song, you need to fill out 2 copyright forms. Because those copyright forms give you your rights to do what you're going to do with this music. You need to fill out the PA form, which gives you a right to license these songs out to other entities that can use that song. But most people are not going to use the song until they have a sound recording of it. So that's why when you go and record the song, or you have someone record the song for you, in other words, you wrote the song, but you're going to have someone else, that's why you become a songwriter. And then someone else records it for you. They're the recording artist for the songwriter. The publisher is just the administrator, or they're just the overseer. So if you take a song and you write a song and if you're not the recording artist too, and going to record your own songs, then you can take that song that you registered your PA form with the Library of Congress, and you can say, well, I'm gonna license it out. You can license and say, okay, well, I'm gonna license it out for this record label who's actually got contract for a recording artist to record your song. So that way you can get paid royalties for the use of that song. But if you're the recording artist, that's why you need to fill out the SR form and record it yourself. And that way you can actually get royalties for the reproduction of that song, meaning you're going to make multiple copies of it. Meaning if I make a master CD copy and they start making duplicates of it, that gives you the right, allows you, your rights allows you to duplicate it because you are the owner of the SR form. You're the owner of the copyright to recopy that sound recording. But the problem is the record labels will say, well, I'm going to make you sign a contract to give up the sound recording of that song so we can own it. And the reason why they do that, because they can still make money off it by making every song gets put into what they call a catalog. So they basically says, okay, we're going to build up our catalog so that way whenever people want to use these songs, and we can license people out to use these songs all the time, even when it's not on the charts being sold anymore as a mechanical physical copy, it can still be used in other places, like on the radio to be still being played on the performance rights. It still could be played under non-interactive places. That means, in other words, you don't get to tell the platform, versus like Spotify, you can set up your own playlist versus Pandora where you cannot. There's stuff like that, but you have I don't like the fact that they say, well, you give up 100% ownership and we're only going to give you 15% of ownership of your own property. That's the part I don't like. It's not, the numbers aren't fair because they're trying to shift the amount of money that's going to be made from the sound recording sales. They're trying to shift it where they're going to get 80% of it. You're only going to get 15 or 12 to 15% of it. That's the part I don't like. Because, you know, artists, the record labels, they're trying to say, well, we're the bank loaner. Can you imagine? And this is an owner royalty rate versus a flat fee. This is the reason why some people say, well, you know, if you're just going to do that, that's why some people say, well, I'd rather just, if you know you can make $1 million versus the royalty rate, we're only going to pay you, you know, 50,000 or whatever, the lowest amount of number that it is. Instead of you making a full, let's say if your album, you sold your album by yourself you sold 1 million copies without a record label, that's total $10 million goes to you. But if you only give 15% of $1 million of that 10 million, you think about $1 million, 10% of $1 million is 100,000, right? So 15% is about 150,000, right? So if you sold 10 million, you're only going to get 1.5 million of it instead of the whole 10 million. They're going to shift it like that. And then on top of that, they've already advanced you $500,000, so you don't even get the 1.5 million. Now it's down to just 1 million. So it went from 15% to 10%, or you get what I'm going with that. Then the touring support is another 700,000 or whatever, or $1 million in touring support. So now they took the entire whole amount because you only got 15% of it. Versus if you had 50-50, so if it made 10 million and you had 50% of it, that's a more fair advance for the risk. I'm going to give you 50, we'll split 50-50. But in that way, if they want to still recoup their touring support and their advance money back, so if they made $10 million, they still get their $5 million, but they also get their $1.5 million for their touring support and their advance. That still leaves the artist with $3.5 million. An artist can live off of that versus not having any money at all, because the artist still has to pay. They put it in a way where the artist still has to pay the business manager, the producers, because the producer gets their 3 points off the sales, which means 3 points of, you take $10 million and 3%, 3 points or 3%. Well, 3%, you get what I'm saying. If 1% is if you talk about 1% is about $100,000 versus 10%, of $10 million is $1 million, right? So if you take 10%, so half, if you take 5%, that's only 500,000. So you take it's only about $300,000 out of a $10 million sale for the producer. So the artist still got to pay $300,000 to the producer, right? And then they still got to pay the business manager, and they still got to pay the artist manager, and they still got to pay the lawyer. And then they got to split sheets and splits between, if it's a group, if it's a band or a group, they got to split the money after that too. And then after that, they still have to split with split sheets, if there's any split sheets on split payments, to pay any other contributors. Maybe they're making contributors to the songwriters or whatever. Because a portion of the sales is still going to go to the songwriter, what we call mechanical royalties. I think the average is 9.1 cents, something like that. So they're going to get 9.1, and that's going to split between the songwriter. This is per sale too. So $91,000, or out of $1 million or whatever the amount is, 600,000, whatever the amount is, they still split that to the songwriter and the publisher. And sometimes the publishing company is the record label. Sometimes they have, that's why a lot of times when a record label is the publishing company, they try to sneak another way to make the artist give up their publishing rights as well if they are songwriters. Some recording artists sign a contract where they just are recording artists only. You know, you would have singers like Luther Vandross or Whitney Houston, you know, rest in peace. A lot of artists like that sung other people's songs mostly. I don't know too many songs that the only time you can get any writer credit is when they were a co-writer. Then they would get a little bit of the right of they would split some of the, you know, they could split some of the payment that money came in to those recording artists if they were a co-writer. But a lot of recording artists, a lot sing other people's songs. And when they sing other people's songs, they can't get publishing. They can't get songwriter royalties. They can't, because they didn't write it. They can only get performance royalties, and that means they can only get performance based on their contract and how much percentage. And like I said, the record labels lowball. That's what I don't like about record labels, and they've been doing that. And on top of that, not only would they recoup the touring support and the advances, they might recoup anything to help the artists that needed money to do marketing. They might recoup anything, and then they would come up with things like, we're going to deduct manufacturing costs. Then we're going to recoup studio time, even though they gave you the advance for the studio time. They're going, you know, they might come up with something, say, well, we're going to advance any cost that you did for studio time. And then we're also going to recoup free goods, you know, percentage for that, and all these other deductions. That's what I don't like record labels. And then on top of that, if they have creative control, they can pick whatever songs that you bring to them. They might not like none of the songs you bring. They create, because they have creative control. They might not like the artwork. They might not like the layout. They might not even like the CD sleeve. They might not. There's a whole things they might or might not like that you want to release, and they like, well, we're not releasing that. That's what I don't like about record labels. Artists don't have control. They're not getting and the artist is not getting a whole lot of money. And on top of that, the artist still has to pay bills. They still have to live. They still got to pay people. That's what I don't like about record labels. And that's the reason why record labels, the model of it, the whole model system of how record labels were doing artists, it needed to go away. It wasn't fair. It wouldn't be so bad if it was a better, if it was a better agreement, a better record deal, a better contract. But they would do that because they knew they can get away with it, because they would sit there and say, you're an unknown artist, so we're only going to give you a small piece of the pie, a tiny bit. And then if the artist happens to blow up and they have, well, let's release it and see what happens. You know, that's why they would have these 5 to 7 record deals with the stipulation of based on how each record is doing. In other words, you release one and it doesn't do well, and they release another do well, they might not even release the third one. They might just put you on the shelf, you know, or they might just drop you altogether. But if it's doing well, and the record they might even put it in a way where they would even, another thing I don't like about record labels is they would try to keep you in your contract by saying, we have the right to extend the contract. You know, there's no exit out of your contract. You know, and then on top of that, they would have another thing. They would say, well, because we're going to own the masters, we get to own the masters forever. And on top of that, they try to make it where the artist can't do anything and try to renegotiate, get out of their contract and find a better record label to give them a better deal. You know, there's all these little things about record labels that would do stuff like that. That's what I don't like about record labels, why they needed to go away. You know, just, you know, they try, you know, it's such a whatever the case. So that's the reason. So I'm done with the video. These are the reasons why I don't like record labels. You know, and with artists now, artists can sign, they can do their own record stream with PROs and MROs and Sound Exchange and Song Trust or whatever, or TuneCore, whatever they want to go with. They can do all this stuff on their own. And because there is YouTube and TikTok and Facebook and all these marketing strategies, and all these distribution, you have with all these like DistroKid and 1RPM, or choosing a distributor that can help them get on streaming sites and everything else. And the artists can just, they can build their own artist page, and they can start their own LLC, and they can start their own publishing, or go with a publisher like Song Trust, or whatever the case. They can do all this themselves. Because the people just don't need the radio that much anymore. People are listening to XM Sirius Satellite, and they're listening to Pandora and Spotify, and listen to everything. They're listening to internet streaming and all that. They're listening to YouTube. Most people, or they'll put everything on their cell phone or iPad or iPod or whatever. They put everything, and they put their whole library of music they want to listen to on that, and just listen to it and Bluetooth it and listen to. Most people just don't listen to the radio like that. So that gatekeepers, it had to be mandatory to listen to artists, but now it's an option. So radio stations are like, the radio stations weren't really in the business for artists. They were in the business of advertisement. That's how they make their money. It's through ads. And that's how YouTube and all these other places are making their money, through ads. Because ads pay for the advertising time. That's how they pay their bills. So artists have options. They don't really need that anymore. The only thing that's still kind of expensive is touring. So, but if an artist can, whatever case, because, what is it? Live Nation or whatever still controlling touring or whatever. He used to be Ticketmasters and all that, but that's down the road. But there's options. Artists have options. All they got to do is do the work. So, and a lot of labels would do the work. Some of them wouldn't. It just depends on the label. So it's kind of like, that's why I'm not big on labels. My glasses falling. So I'm done with the video. That's it. Y'all have a great one.